When you think of Apple, what comes to mind? Probably the device in your pocket or on your desk. That sleek iPhone, that powerful MacBook, maybe the AirPods you've got in right now. We see the beautiful design, we feel that seamless software. It's magic, right? But what if I told you that underneath that carefully crafted surface, there's a global machine of almost unimaginable complexity and power? A machine that's been built over decades on ruthless efficiency, strategic genius, and absolute control. So, to really get how Apple became the world's first $3 trillion company, and maybe more importantly, why it's now facing this historic fight with governments all over the world, we have to look past the products. We've got to peel back the layers of its strategy one by one to really see the intricate machinery that's driving all that magic. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. Okay, let's get into it. So here's how we're going to do this. Think of it like peeling an onion. First, we'll start on the outside with the Apple the products. Then we go a layer deeper into their services division, which has become this incredible profit engine for the company. After that, we're going to expose the invisible financial and operational machine that Tim Cook built. Honestly, it's the real source of Apple's power. Then we'll get into the controversial stuff, the price of that power. And finally, we'll get to the very core, this antitrust battle that could change everything. That's our roadmap. All right, so layer one. This is the Apple that everybody knows, and let's be honest, most of us love. It's the beautifully designed hardware that just feels premium in your hand. It's the intuitive software that just works. This is that polished surface, that powerful first impression. It's the front door to Apple's world. But you have to understand, this is just the beginning of the story. And here's the key thing to get. The iPhone or the Mac, it's not just a product you buy anymore. It's the key to an entire kingdom. It's the gateway. The real story, the place where Apple's incredible power comes from, is the massive interconnected ecosystem of software and services that's built around that hardware. An ecosystem that's designed to be super inviting to get into and really, really hard to leave. And that brings us to the next layer we've got to peel back. For decades, Apple was a hardware company. Simple as that. It made money selling you things. But over the last 10 years or so, it has pulled off one of the most brilliant strategic pivots in corporate history. It's built a totally new foundation for its empire, services. And this isn't just some side business. It is quickly becoming the very core of Apple's profit and its entire future. And this number shows you just how massive that shift has been. In its last full fiscal year, Apple's services division, that's the App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, all that stuff, brought in over $109 billion. To give you some perspective, if Apple Services was its own company, it would be bigger than Nike, McDonald's, and Netflix combined. It'd be a Fortune 50 giant all by itself. Insane. Now, here's where the strategy gets really, really smart. It's not just about how much money is coming in, it's about how profitable that money is. The gross margin on services is a staggering 75%. Now, compare that to hardware, which is about 36%, less than half. So think about it this way. For every dollar they make from services, Apple keeps 75 cents. For every dollar they make selling you an iPhone, they only keep 36 cents. It is a fire hose of pure profit. And this incredible growth isn't just one thing. It's coming from everywhere. The App Store, cloud services, music, payments, ads, video, they've all hit all-time revenue records. And yeah, each one of these is a huge business on its own. But the real power, it's in how they all lock together and reinforce each other. And this brings us to the pure genius of the services model. It's not just about making a ton of recurring high margin money. See, every time you upload your family photos to iCloud, or make playlists in Apple Music, or use Apple Pay, the cost and the hassle of switching to something like Android just goes up and up. Your data, your music, your financial life, it all gets woven deep into the Apple ecosystem. This lock-in effect, or what economists call high switching costs, well, it's one of Apple's most powerful weapons. And the scale of these services is just so massive that even their partners are giants of global finance. I mean, take the Apple Card. Just recently, Apple started moving its partnership for this multi-billion-dollar credit card from Goldman Sachs, a legendary investment bank, over to Chase, a massive retail bank. Now, this isn't some small change. We're talking about a credit portfolio worth tens of billions of dollars. It just goes to show you how deeply Apple has embedded itself into the very core of the financial services industry. Okay, let's peel back that next layer and see how this all works. So if services are the new profit engine, this next layer, well, it's the invisible machine that makes the entire company run with a level of efficiency that is, frankly, legendary. This is the masterpiece of operational excellence, and it was pretty much all architected by the current CEO, Tim Cook. To understand Apple today, you absolutely have to understand this machine. And to understand the machine, you gotta understand its architect. When Tim Cook joined Apple back in 1998, the company was practically bankrupt. It was drowning in a horribly inefficient supply chain. I mean, they had warehouses full of unsold products just collecting dust. Cook wasn't a product guy like Steve Jobs. He was a quiet, relentless operations genius, a master of logistics brought in to fix a system that was just hemorrhaging cash. His whole path to becoming CEO was forged in that unglamorous but critical world of manufacturing and supply chains. And he did just that. He brought in what we can call the Cook Doctrine. First, just-in-time manufacturing, making sure parts showed up right when they were needed. That flashed the cash tied up in inventory. Second, he radically simplified things, cutting the number of suppliers from over 100 down to just a few dozen. That gave Apple massive bargaining power. Third, he outsourced manufacturing to partners like Foxconn, turning fixed costs into variable ones. And finally, he built this incredible centralized data-driven logistics network to manage it all. He literally turned Apple's biggest weakness into its greatest strength. Now, if you want to see all that operational genius boiled down to a single mind-blowing number, you look at this metric, the cash conversion cycle, or CCC. Basically, it measures how many days it takes for a company to turn its inventory into cash. For pretty much every company on earth that makes physical stuff, this number is positive, right? It costs money to build something and it takes time to sell it and get paid. But Apple is different. Apple's cash conversion cycle is negative. So what does that even mean? It means Apple gets paid by you, the customer, long before it has to pay its suppliers for the parts. Think about a new iPhone launch. Millions of people pre-order and pay weeks ahead of time. Apple takes that cash, your cash, and uses it to run its business. It then builds and ships your phone, and only months later does it finally pay to companies that made the screen, the chip, the casing. It's like getting a massive multi-billion-dollar interest-free loan from both its customers and its suppliers at the exact same time. And when you compare it to its rivals, well, the scale of this advantage is just staggering. At the end of 2024, Apple's ZCC was negative 72 days. Microsoft, another super efficient company, was at negative 12. But now look at the hardware guys. Google is at a positive 40 days, and Apple's biggest rival in smartphones, Samsung, is at a positive 127 days. That means Samsung has to fund its own operations for over 4 months before it gets its money back. Apple, it gets paid over 2 months before it has to pay its bills. It's an almost unbelievable advantage. And all of that financial efficiency translates directly into incredible value for shareholders. This number right here is Apple's return on invested capital in 2024 at almost 47%. It means for every single dollar Apple puts back into its business, like for R&D or new stores, it generates almost 47 cents in profit after tax. That incredible return is a direct result of that hyper-efficient machine, all funded by that negative cash conversion cycle. Okay, we've gone deep on the services and financial engines that make Apple tick. This is a great place to take a quick breath. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. All right, so when you're that profitable, you have a pretty unique problem. What do you do with tens of billions of dollars in profit? And this brings us to the next and, let's say, more controversial layer of our onion. With immense profitability comes the question of how you protect it and how it gets taxed. And this leads us to the aggressive, though mostly legal, financial strategies Apple uses. Strategies that have drawn a ton of criticism, but also a fierce defense. Just to set the stage here, at its peak, it was estimated that US corporations were holding a mind-boggling $2.5 trillion in cash overseas. And this wasn't by accident. It was the direct result of how the US tax code was set up. And for years, Apple was the poster child for this whole thing, holding hundreds of billions of dollars offshore. So why do they do it? Well, it comes down to two different ways of taxing companies. See, most countries use a territorial system. They only tax the money a company makes inside their country. But for a long time, the US used a worldwide system. That meant it wanted to tax a company's profits from everywhere on the globe. But here's the catch. The US tax was only due when the money was brought back home. So this created a massive incentive for companies like Apple to just leave their foreign profits overseas, effectively locking them out to avoid a huge tax bill. And of course, this practice has real-world consequences and gets a lot of heat. This quote here is from Brian Murphy. He's the president of a community college just a mile and a half from Apple's giant headquarters. And while he's quick to say Apple isn't directly to blame for the state's budget problems, he sees their tax strategies as part of a bigger issue. It just highlights the stark contrast between incredible corporate wealth and struggling local public services. And right there, that's Tim Cook's side of the argument. His defense is simple. The company is following the law, exactly as it's written. He says it's not about patriotism, it's about his fiduciary duty, his legal obligation to do what's best financially for the company's owners, which are the shareholders. And from his perspective, bringing that cash back at a 40% tax rate would be a failure of that duty, especially when the law gives him a perfectly legal way to avoid it. It just perfectly captures that tension between what is legal and what some people see as a moral responsibility. And this brings us to the very core of the onion. All these layers we've just peeled back: the hardware gateway, the services lock-in, the operational dominance, the financial power. None of it has gone unnoticed. And it has all culminated in this: a historic antitrust showdown with the US government that strikes at the very heart of Apple's entire business model. In March of 2024, the Department of Justice, along with 16 state attorneys general, filed a landmark lawsuit against Apple. And the core accusation is this: that Apple has unlawfully used its gatekeeper power to maintain a monopoly in the smartphone market, not by just making a better product, but by actively and illegally shutting down technologies that would have increased competition and made it easier for you to switch away from the iPhone. Now, the lawsuit points to 5 key areas where they say Apple broke the law. First, blocking super apps. Think of something like China's WeChat, which is like a mini operating system inside a map, because they could make people less dependent on iOS. Second, suppressing cloud gaming services, which threatens Apple's hardware sales and App Store fees. Third, intentionally making cross-platform messaging worse. You know it as the green bubble effect, to create social pressure to stay on iMessage. Fourth, limiting what third-party smartwatches can do to push you towards the Apple Watch. And fifth, blocking competing digital wallets from using the iPhone's tap-to-pay chip to protect Apple Pay. And according to the DOJ, these aren't just one-off business decisions. No, they're part of a deliberate interlocking strategy. It leverages those powerful network effects where more users bring more developers, which brings more users, and combines them with those high switching costs we talked about earlier. All of that, plus Apple's control over hardware, software, and services, creates what the government is now calling an illegal monopoly. So what's the solution if the government wins? Well, a key idea coming out of research from Yale is this concept of equitable interoperability. Now, this isn't about breaking Apple up into smaller companies. Instead, it would force Apple to give third-party apps and devices access to the iPhone's core functions on the same terms as its own services. Basically, it means Apple couldn't handicap a competing smartwatch or messaging app just to give its own products an unfair advantage. This table breaks down what those fixes might actually look like. For apps and devices, it means forcing them to open up key APIs. For app distribution, it means allowing other app stores and something called sideloading, which is just being able to download an app from a developer's website, completely bypassing the App Store. To make it easier to switch, it would require iMessage to work with other platforms and make it easier to move your data. And to make sure it all happens, they're proposing a technical committee to oversee everything. Now, what's really important here is that this isn't just some legal theory. There is a real-world test happening right now. The European Union's Digital Markets Act, the DNA, is already forcing Apple to make a lot of these exact changes over in Europe, including allowing third-party app stores. So this gives US courts a blueprint, and it really puts pressure on Apple when they claim that these kinds of changes are technically impossible or would somehow destroy user security. And so, there you have it. Our journey through the layers of the onion is complete. We've gone from the shiny outside of Apple's products through its insanely profitable services, its hyper-efficient financial machine, its controversial tax strategies, all the way down to the very core of its power, a walled garden so successful and so dominant that it's now facing a historic challenge to its very design. What a complex story of innovation and power. Before we wrap up, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. At the end of the day, this all boils down to one fundamental question for regulators, for competitors, and for every single one of us as consumers. Apple built its empire on the promise of a seamless, secure, perfectly integrated experience, a walled garden. The question now being argued in the highest courts is whether the safety and convenience of that garden have come at too high a price for competition, for innovation, and for choice. Is a walled garden ever worth the price of admission?